The thin linen envelope slid across the mahogany table with a soft, dismissive whisper. It came to rest beside my crystal water glass, slightly crooked, an unwelcome disruption in the perfect symmetry of the place setting. I looked down at it, then up at Patricia, Evan's mother. She was smiling but not warmly. It was the kind of smile a shark gives just before deciding you're worth eating. "Open it, dear," she said, her voice glazed in artificial sweetness. "Consider it an investment in your future." My future? I glanced at Evan. He was staring at his plate of barely touched sea bass, cutting it into precise, useless pieces, refusing to meet my eyes. My stomach tightened. I lifted the envelope. It felt light, insignificant. Inside were 15 crisp $100 bills. $1,500. I looked up confused. "Is this a gift?" Patricia laughed. A tinkling sound that matched the expensive crystals surrounding us. "Oh heavens, no. It's an etiquette stipend. We call it the Grace Improvement Fund." She leaned forward, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried perfectly across the table. "Evan's tenure review is coming up. And honestly, darling, that rural look of yours, it's charming in a quaint way, but it won't do for faculty dinners. You need polishing, fixing, before you embarrass him." Silence swallowed the room. I stared at the money, then at Evan, waiting for anything, but he just kept cutting his fish, knife scraping porcelain in a steady, cowardly rhythm. "Before I tell you what I did with that envelope, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is. I want to know how far this story travels." I didn't wear that dress to insult them. I wore it because in my real life I don't dress for an audience. I dress for the lab. I live in Wicker Park, the gritty, creative heart of Chicago, where the coffee is strong and no one cares about linen thread counts. That's where I met Evan. He was sitting in the corner of my regular cafe, grading papers with the intense furrowed brow of a man convinced he was the only person in the room thinking deep thoughts. I was wearing a hoodie, frantically typing a grant rejection appeal on my phone. He saw a frazzled researcher, someone struggling, someone who needed saving. And Evan loved being a savior. For 2 years, he played the role of intellectual provider. He loved explaining history to me, loved buying dinner at mid-range Italian restaurants like a benevolent king feeding a peasant. He loved being the stable one. He never asked about my work. My biotech research was just cute science experiments to him, a hobby that barely paid the rent. What he didn't know was that 18 months ago, my startup was acquired by a major pharmaceutical company. He didn't know that the grant rejection was actually a licensing negotiation worth millions. He didn't know my monthly dividend was roughly what he earned in 2 years. I didn't hide it to deceive him. I hid it to protect myself. I call it the armor of invisibility. When you're a young woman in high-stakes tech, money changes the way people look at you. It turns you from a person into an opportunity. Men stop looking at your eyes and start calculating your worth. So I let the world see the messy bun, the worn sneakers, the struggling scientist. It was a filter. I wanted to know if someone could love Grace, not my solvency. I thought Evan did. I was wrong. Sitting under Patricia's cold gaze, I finally understood it. He didn't love me for who I was. He loved who he was when he was with me. I wasn't his partner. I was his charity case. And to his family, I wasn't even that. I was a stain they were trying to bleach out. Patricia waited for me to take the money, to thank her, to be grateful. She thought she was looking at a poor girl desperate to belong. She had no idea she was looking at the woman who could buy her entire neighborhood. The armor had done its job, and now it was time to take it off. 5 minutes later, the main event walked in. Vanessa, Evan's ex-girlfriend, daughter of a Swiss diplomat. Patricia claimed she'd just happened to be nearby. She floated in wearing silk that cost more than my car. Richard nearly tripped pulling out her chair. They seated her beside Evan. I was suddenly an audience member at my own breakup. Patricia spent the next 20 minutes conducting a forensic comparison between us. Vanessa's gallery opening in Milan. My ability to find wine coupons. Her lineage. My usefulness. Then came the moment that sucked the air from the room. Patricia lifted Vanessa's hand like a prize exhibit. "Look at these fingers," she cooed. "Elegant. Unblemished. Piano hands. That is refinement." Then she pointed at mine. Grace dear, your hands look so rough. Gardening without gloves? Have you tried lemon juice? I looked down. Dry skin. Ragged cuticles. A small chemical burn from liquid nitrogen 3 weeks earlier. These hands had built a sequencing machine now used in pediatric cancer research. They were tools. To her they were ugly. I looked at Evan. This was his moment. He smiled at Vanessa. Nostalgic. Regretful. That's when I understood. Vanessa was the life he thought he deserved. I was the life he feared. When Richard mocked my career, something shifted. I stopped reacting emotionally. I started analyzing data. The fraying cuffs of his suit. The empty outlines where paintings once hung. Patricia's white knuckles as the wine bottle emptied. They weren't powerful. They were terrified. Asset-rich. Cash-poor. Trapped in a legacy they couldn't afford. My struggling scientist persona threatened them, not because I was beneath them but because I was free. Their cruelty wasn't dominance. It was panic. When Patricia offered me a receptionist job, I set my fork down. Actually, Patricia, I won't be needing one. I leaned back. My startup was acquired 18 months ago. By Novartis. Silence. For how much? Richard whispered. Enough that my monthly dividend is $85,000. Patricia stared at the envelope like it was Monopoly money. Then I slid my phone across the table. Your anonymous donor? That was me. Transaction. Cancelled. Richard's phone chimed. Their faces collapsed. Charity must be humiliating, I said, standing. Especially when you mistake it for superiority. Evan begged. I walked out. The next morning, I redirected the $2 million not back to myself, but to create the Dignity Scholarship for underprivileged girls in STEM. 6 months later, the estate was sold. Evan kept calling. I was too busy opening my new lab. 45 employees. Real work. Real impact. I still wear my messy bun. Still wear my sneakers. And when I look out at the Chicago skyline late at night, I smile. Not because I'm wealthy, but because I finally chose my worth for myself.